wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and now here's your host, Rich Barris.
Hey folks, happy Friday. Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit, and I am your host, Rich Barris, the People's Pundit. We're going to have Mike Davis, the founder and president of Article 3 Project on a little bit later to talk about further weaponization of the Justice Department. And I got to get a story in, a read of a story in before we do so we can lay the groundwork for that. We're going to talk about a couple of different instances. But before I do, and I know I'm going to start with this, and because it's Free Will on Friday, no doubt there will be questions, and I'm going to wind up probably ending with it too. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories in a timeline, all from the archives of People's Pundit Daily, by the way, which are going to highlight this overall segment or give us or walk us through a timeline of how this happened. So just so everybody understands, yesterday I wasn't really I wasn't attacking her. It's just she's the latest to push this narrative, and it's a narrative that you hear from a certain soon-to-be presidential candidate or expected presidential candidate, and it's not true. All right, so why am I so upset by this lie? Like, look, politicians tell lies, exaggerate your record, do whatever you got to do to appeal to voters. That's on you. And voters, it's on you to make a decision who you're going to vote for. I'm not telling you who to do that, who to vote for, or how to do that. That is your sacred right and your duty. However, what's true is true. What's false is false. And when we look behind the demographics of states and how they change and political coalitions change, that is what I do. That's my right, and that's my, what I consider at this point, duty to do. I spent almost 2 decades in this state, a decade and a half. It was not what it is now. And I see a lot of people taking credit for this change they had nothing to do with. They're taking credit as if I saw them as activists on the ground doing it, or I saw them in an administration. I tell you this all the time, politics, economics are politics. Politics is economics. I didn't see these people involved at all during the change in policies that shored up this demographic shift. Let's take a look, of course, what I'm talking about. And who I was talking about was the former press secretary to Donald Trump, Kayleigh McEnany. I wasn't, again, not really attacking her, simply making a statement that this is now, she is the last in a laundry list of people that have gone on to Twitter with their large Twitter accounts and made these claims, and they are not true. So we're going to take a overall throughout the entire episode, a very, very in-depth look at Florida over the course of, well, first decades. And I'm going to bring up the interactive version of this. We'll discuss it in a little bit as we go here. But as you can clearly see, this is something that viewers of mine have been hearing this from me for years. Followers of mine have been hearing or reading about this from me for years. 2016, before 2016. If you look, this is a chart of Florida registration by party affiliation since the Secretary of State in the Sunshine State began tracking by party, which was in 1972. Going back to the Nixon era, folks. Nixon. Democrats had a large advantage that differed significantly for a very, very long time until right before the 2020 election. It was shrinking, and that trend has shrunk, has shown two shrinking periods, or 2 periods of which the Democratic advantage considerably shrunk. We can see it. It didn't arrest much. We can see it happening, whether it's over one is rather long term. The other one is, pretty. It happened very quickly, and we're going to discuss why it happened. I'm going to try to do this before Mike gets on here, but like I said, I want to read something leading up to Mike's interview. So let's do this as fast as we can. Obviously, and let me get this out of the way for a second. No, keep it up as I say this. Mitt Romney barely lost the state of Florida, but he lost it. If you go back and if we get let's get the interactive version, which is going to be a little bit harder for you to see, which is why I didn't want to do this to you right away. But if we get the interactive version of this, what we're going to see is actual numbers. All right. And I will try to zoom it in. Let me zoom it in before I bring it up to you so you guys can see it at least a little bit better or somewhat better. All right. So we will remove this from the screen. Okay. And we will add this. I was going to make it. Yeah, I'll put me. Yeah, that's good. Right. You guys can see that. Nah, let's do this. All right. This is it. Same thing. Only it's the interactive version so you can see. All right. I will actually send these links out in a little bit so you guys can tell, but a lot of you probably still have it. If you've been following me for a long time, you know that this chart is old. All right. This is something that's been consistent for a while. Obviously, with the blue column, you can see the Democratic advantage that vanishes by the time Republicans, this is on official and on the record. All right. But you see it jump here from September 2021 and on. Voter file is a little bit laggy. So for a while there, we used to give you that as well, but it does lag at least a month. All right. So what we see here is a period where in the 70s, Democrat registration picked up. There's a group of voters we have to discuss before we go over this chart. And that voter is called the white Southern Democrat. As they aged in various states, they would keep their Democratic registration status, but they would vote Republican for most definitely president, but also for Senate even until somebody like a Bill Nelson came around. That's how Bill Nelson was able to hold his seat until Rick Scott exposed him as a not moderate and took him out. All right. So, but for a while, other states, North Carolina, would it shock you if I told you that some of these states, this trend happened quicker? This process of these voters switching from Democrat to Republican, not just voting Republican at the presidential level, because they would still vote Democrat down ticket. But Florida is way ahead of the trend in the change of registration from Southern white Democrats. They changed from Democrat to Republican, and they did it over 6-7 years ago. It's done. 8 years ago, really, is when it started to fall off. The trend in Florida towards Republicans is being driven by something else. And why am I making a big deal about this? Because the media for a long time, so that's what Florida is. They're Democrats in registration, but they vote Republican. That is not true. It was not true during the Trump era when he faced Hillary, and it was not true in the Trump era when he faced Biden. And something magnificent for Republicans has happened within the last few years. Almost really, it's been going on for 4.5 roughly years, but some of them did not. They weren't eligible to vote yet. We're going to talk about it. Those of you who have been around me been with me for a long time, you remember Barnes and I hysterically laughing at Nate Cohen at the New York Times. He couldn't understand why Trump's approval rating was so high in Miami-Dade. He only won 33% in 16. How could his approval rating be so strong in Miami? He had no idea what was happening. And we chuckled and we laughed. And many of you who were watched those episodes and have been with me, you already know what I'm going to say. Florida is way ahead in that trend with those voters. But we can compare them, or just give a great juxtaposition would be Louisiana, where there are still more Democrats than Republicans, yet it's obviously a very red state. That registration change has not happened because, as our guest said rightfully last time he was on the program, the white Southern male Republican is the weakest political force in the country. And they are not very good at organizing. They're not very good at standing up to the media. They're afraid. The country club, Southern white Republican, they're afraid. So they have not mobilized. And in a state like Louisiana, they're literally running off of goodwill. That's how a state like Georgia went into play. They just banked on it being a Southern state forever, and that's it. North Carolina is somewhere in the middle of that. We still have a good deal when you're polling and you're asking people about presidential vote preference. There still is a good 10-15% overlap in people we know are registered as Democrats, but they tell us, I'm a Republican, when specifically we ask about presidential races. So they're older, they're whiter. Hyde County is a perfect example, even though it's a small one demographically. It's a perfect example of that. So we have seen those registration changes in North Carolina. Republicans are doing a great job on moving that along, but it is not as advanced as Florida, which it's over. There are no more registration gains from old white Southern Democrats. That is over in Florida. In North Carolina, it's underway, but there are still a lot of Democrats from the eastern counties, like one I just mentioned, all the way past west of Mecklenburg, where it's still very rural, very Democratic in registration, yet they vote very red. Those counties vote very red. We went over lots of them, looking at the maps from 16 and 20 when we did the voter file analysis in North Carolina. It is not mathematically possible for Donald Trump to get those kind of numbers in those counties in North Carolina unless massive numbers of registered Democrats are actually Republicans at the presidential level. Or Trumplicans. Ted Budd did a great job winning them over, by the way, in 2022. He did. That's why he basically crushed Tillis as far as support. Tillis does not always appeal to those kinds of voters. Let's get back to Florida, though. So what has been driving that? There are a couple of stories I want to show you, and I don't want to get rid of that yet, but let's just look where we are right now. As of March 31st, Republicans have a registration advantage of about 150 plus, about 500,000, close to 500,000, but not fully there. That is a big difference from when Obama beat John McCain. Before we get off this, I just want to show you the Democratic advantage was just under 700,000. All right. And when Mitt Romney lost to Barack Obama. Okay. And then also right before Trump obviously had in the 2015 season, you can clearly see that advantage trend down with the advent or the entrance of Trump and his movement into politics. You see a serious acceleration of that trend. Republicans had been chipping, but then it just completely went into overdrive when Trump came on the scene in 2016 and became the nominee. When he beat Hillary Clinton, though, Democrats still had over 300,000, over 330,000 registration advantage over Republicans in the Sunshine State. By the time we get to 2020, the advantage is gone. All right. And we're going to show you it's bare. It's there. It's just honestly, simply, a lot of the records had not updated yet. So we didn't have the numbers, weren't catching up. All right. But the first one I want to show you here is the story. Mitt Romney lost Florida, very close, but lost Florida to Barack Obama in 2012, despite their own claims of voter fraud. And I'm sure there's like I said, there's always irregularities in every election, but he lost the state by 69,000 votes, ballpark. Okay. Or so just under 70,000. There was still a decent registration advantage during that time for Democrats, but afterwards, something changed. Why did Obama hold the state of Florida? Mitt Romney may have done very well in areas, even in some of the Tampa area. He didn't do as good as Trump, but he did better than John McCain for sure. He crunched the rural vote margins as much as he could. I mean, he did what a Republican is trying to do. He just didn't get out a certain group of voters, and he basically split the Cuban vote with Barack Obama and got crushed with every other Hispanic demographic. Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, you name it. And there are lots of Puerto Ricans in the state of Florida. All right. So after Obama beats Mitt Romney, that's why Charlie Crist switched from being a Republican to a Democrat. He thought the winds were blowing in the Democratic favor when it came to the trend. Everybody down there, down here, whatever you want to say, it was my home state. Everybody knows it. Charlie Crist is a finger licker. He has no core. He's got no soul. The guy is whatever the hell he needs to be. Jeb Bush is popular, and I want to run for governor. I'm a Republican. I wanted a high approval rating. Sure, I'll back some conservative policies. The minute it looked like that Democrats' emerging majority was emerging, he jumped ship. He's an idiot. And that's why he got crushed by 18 points, by the way. Nobody likes Charlie Crist. To put him on the ticket shows you how weak the bench is for Democrats. But that's because since Obama beat Romney, they basically abandoned several core pieces of the Obama coalition. They thought that they would have enough Puerto Ricans, they would have enough Mexicans, that they could essentially screw over South Florida and move on, right? And that along with screwing white working class, which is just to me amazing. These are all from the archive. Obama ends wet foot, dry foot policy for conservative voting Cuban immigrants. All right, let me take a pause there for a second. Look at the date. Okay, he's on his way out. This is punishment for swinging back to Donald Trump. Donald Trump won the Cuban vote in 2016, but he won it by a bigger margin than people had expected him to win it. All right. And he still ended up in the 30s in Miami-Dade, but he wasn't winning them by the extent that he won them in 2020 yet. That hadn't been happening, but he still won them over because if you look at the South Florida or Miami poll, whatever it's called down there, sorry guys for blowing your name, they get deep into detail about what are the positions that Cuban Americans in South Florida, which positions do they hold, despite all the idiot rhetoric from CNN and elsewhere. They voted for Donald Trump because they agreed with Donald Trump. They voted for Donald Trump because they agreed with him on every single policy. Trade, immigration, the economy, you name it. That's why Donald Trump won them by a much bigger margin. And again, Romney barely won them. He split them basically with Barack Obama. All right, so look at the date. With only 1 week to go in his presidency, President Barack Obama announced he is ending the long-standing wet foot, dry foot policy for Cuban immigrants. In a statement, the president said it was put in place more than 20 years ago and was designed for a different era. Marco Rubio immediately came out and said he betrayed the Cuban people. All right. Fast forward. I'm trying to do this as quick as I possibly can. Here we go. Fast forward to Donald Trump almost immediately after the summer after he takes office. I was here, by the way. I was there. I remember this like it was yesterday. President Donald Trump announces new Cuba policy in Miami. He goes down there. It's a love fest. All right. And this was Laura's actually. President Donald Trump, I hate this effect. President Donald J. Trump on Friday announced his new Cuba policy in Miami, Florida, rolling back several Obama-era policies to ease restrictions on trade and travel. The U.S. Embassy will remain in Havana, and the transfers of cash that have already been made will be honored. Effective immediately, I am canceling the previous administration's completely one-sided deal with Cuba. I am announcing a new policy just as I promised the Cuban people. It will seek a new deal that benefits the Cuban people and America. Guys, immediately, this was a love fest, okay? I don't know how else to say it. He went down there. He does what Trump does. They embraced him for it. Days later, he sets up the Latinos for Trump in Miami under Mike Pence. Sends Mike Pence down there and put together a coalition to mobilize the Latino community for President Donald Trump in 2020. Under the administration, the Hispanic unemployment rate has hit multiple lows, which, by the way, several of the people who have been attacking me on Twitter for the last few weeks, all right, that whole crew, they somehow thought that was a bad thing. I remember it like it was yesterday. The jobs reports would come out. It would show historic lows for Black Americans, historic lows for Hispanic Americans, and their response was, what about white people? Not that this was a good thing, but where is the help for the white vote? All right, so moving on. This time it is going on as he changes his policy. He's got Bolton in there also doing something funny in a little state called Venezuela. They're basically destabilizing the country. They hate Maduro. All right, they got this guy that they want to basically install. Bolton's doing this. He's neoconning it on steroids. But Trump is allowing it to happen because to Trump, he's thinking, you know what? This could be good for me because I'm going to open this state up for these Venezuelans. They come in droves. They set up shit house right next to Cuban enclaves, and the RNC did nothing. It's the Trump campaign now basically taking over in a joint committee with the RNC that goes in there and welcomes them and shakes their hand and says, hey, how you doing? Welcome to America. Did you register to vote? Many of them were, in fact, newly naturalized and eligible to vote by the time Trump came in up for re-election in 2020, but many of them were not. They were orphaned until the 2022 election. This is why Nate Cohen didn't know what he was looking at. What is this? How could Trump's approval rating be so much higher in South Florida? What's going on? That is what was going on. This is a bloc that said more than 70% of them would vote for Donald Trump. That's how he added between the Cubans, the economic benefits to other Hispanics, and the Venezuelans. That is how he added 200,000 votes in South Florida, even as he did a little bit worse in Monroe County, other parts of Monroe, and in other areas like Duval and not the Panhandle, parts of Tampa, Pinellas County, which he lost barely by like 100 votes. He carried it against Hillary Clinton, but he lost it. Anyone, except for like Nikki Haley at this point, anyone who's a Republican has got a very, very good chance to carry the state of Florida. All right, so moving on real quick, I just want to talk about some other stuff he did that got him a ton of support along the eastern counties, and he did better in Broward and other sites, other places, because he was an economic benefit to the state of Florida. All right, those who were watching the show, reading PPD, the stuff he did for the Space Coast was enormous. He's probably the first Republican to be liked by NASA employees. He brought new jobs over there that guess who has to fill them? And they vote how? Right. So he really juiced it for them and he got rewarded for it. All right, so I could keep on. I want to keep Mike waiting because I do want to start with Mike's interview in a second here. But this goes back to, let me just go back to 2018. I'm explaining 2020, right before 2020. The polls have Biden up. The New York Times has Biden up by 6. Quinnipiac is Biden up by 6. Everybody's got Biden winning the state of Florida. And I'm like, this is insanity. There is zero chance that Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump in the state of Florida. And we did a little bit rewind in time, took a look at why in 18, because by 2018, some of these changes had already been underway. And by the way, a massive influx of working class whites from the Northeast, Irish, Hispanic, Italian, whatever it may be, flooding in from northeastern depressed economically states, headed to Florida in numbers that we had not seen. And it wasn't the pandemic that really caused it. It accelerated in a short term during the pandemic because there were New Yorkers fleeing to get out of Cuomo's, hell. But that's not even close to the bulk of what happened. This was a flee to Florida. And in 2018, to the benefit of the current governor who would have lost, they came out to defend their president. And they were one of few, along with Ohio, they were one of few battleground states to buck the Democratic shift in 2018. Come 2020, it wasn't even going to be close. And I had to go back and say, look, we're the only ones. Look, here's the chart. We're explaining registration statistics by party, right? Historical context, an analysis of the voter file, inferred ethnicity. It's not getting any whiter, folks. Florida got less white under Trump and it got more Republican. How women are more Republican in Florida than the nation. And that obviously turnout probability is going to put it somewhere between R+4 and R+8. And that's exactly what happened. The power of incumbency, sure, but that's bottom line. We'll revisit this in more detail in a second, but I want to get in another story. Actually, I'll just bring bring it in when we talk to him about it. But you guys obviously saw between the two shows, Wednesday and Friday, Mr. Texera has been the leaker, Massachusetts National Guardsman, who leaked whatever we can call the Ukraine papers, showing obviously that the war in Ukraine is not going well for the Ukrainians, which, by the way, for a year now, we've been getting messages from YouTube saying I got to stop talking about how bad the war is going in Ukraine, because if I don't, they're going to take the money away from the earnings of the video. Well, thank God I have a business that's successful. Yeah, I don't need their money, so I didn't care. Anyway, this guy has been arrested. An amazing divide on this side, on the Republican side, about whether he's a hero or whether he's a whistleblower or whether he's a criminal. All right. To me, there's another conversation here, and that's what I'm going to bring in. And that conversation is just another example of different systems of justice. It's not even a justice system. It's not two-tier. There is no justice. The Supreme Court leaker is still out. Alex Vindman was a whistleblower. Eric Caramella was a whistleblower. This guy is a traitor and a criminal because the standards are different. And that's what I'm going to bring in Mike Davis, the founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Mike, thanks for coming back on. There's so much I want to ask you. I really appreciate you making the time. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with this one, although, I'm looking at these examples, going through, trying to, just think about what I wanted to talk to you about today. And there's everything from social issues to a case like this, which is, I guess, a national security case, right? Where we can see it's a weaponization, or an arbitrary application of the law, I guess I would say. What's your thought on this before we, get into the other cases? They keep calling him a kid. He's 21. It's not a kid. This guardsman's predicament that he's in. I mean, he could be in a lot of trouble for this, right? I guess that's the one thing I want to ask you. What kind of trouble is he facing for leaking these documents? And then the second part of it is, we still have, nobody knows who leaked Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court, right? Alex Vindman was heralded as a hero. Eric Caramella, however you say his name, he was, a whistleblower, not somebody who was, betraying his oath. It's double standards, not even the word, but I'll just let you respond.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't have people in our government leaking classified material. And there is a process. If you want to be a whistleblower, there's a process that you go through the Inspector General's office and through Congress. So we cannot condone this behavior in any way, shape, or form. The problem is we can't have two systems of justice. This kid leaked classified material that was damaging to the globalist Ukraine effort. So of course they're going to go after him and throw the book at him. But how about, like you said, when Vindman illegally leaked classified material from the Trump White House that supported the globalist effort, he became a hero. How about when Hunter Biden, Miranda Devine reported this, that Hunter Biden almost certainly used Biden's stolen classified records from the Obama White House to draft a 23-paragraph memo to secure illegal funding from Chinese and Ukrainian oligarchs. So how is that not an espionage violation? I am all for charging espionage in these situations, but you have to charge it equally. And I don't understand how you can charge these low-level people for espionage, for leaking their classified material, but the most senior people, whether it's someone on the National Security Council like Vindman in a position of the highest position of trust in the White House National Security Council, or then Vice President Joe Biden and his sleazebag son Hunter, I don't know how we can charge the line officers and not charge the more senior people who have more of an impact and are more in more of a sensitive position.
Yeah, you said there's a process. That's what jumped out at me. When we talk about cases like Snowden, at least it does appear he tried to make an effort. Although I was, obviously the information that we got from Snowden is valuable. But to me, immediately I thought, Mike, he couldn't have gone to like Matt Gaetz. Like, there's somebody, because there are people on the Republican caucus who would have not wanted this and probably would have turned their heads. But there are definitely people who are against the spending in Ukraine that I feel like he could have went to. Is there not?
Yeah, I worked for Senator Chuck Grassley, who has been the king of oversight and the protector of whistleblowers for 40 years.
I can't imagine. Right, he would not have taken this.
Yeah, he's the top Republican on the Senate Budget Committee. Any whistleblower can go to his office anytime they want, and they're protected. It's protected. It's a protected process. They're protected by statute. You can't have whistleblowers just taking it on themselves to just go leak stuff on the internet. That's just not, it's not acceptable. It's also not acceptable that we have selective prosecution of 21-year-olds who did this, but not the Venmans and the Bidens of the world.
Yeah, I'm looking at how they pursued him, the things that obviously were said about him immediately, the racial, the insinuations, he's a racist, he's anti-Semitic. I mean, they just went after him, whether it was true or not. It's a different treatment. Again, I really wish he would have went to the senator, or, again, there's somebody in the House that would have taken it. I just don't believe there wasn't. I wish he would have done it that way instead. But and you have these different sets of rules. Vindman was, he's been elevated now to hero status for these people. And he helped start this conflict, right? I think that's what people are, looking at. Here's Vindman. He leaked. Eric leaked. They helped start. They wanted this conflict. They got it now. Nothing happened to them. And here's a 21-year-old guardsman who leaks showing that the effort itself is, not what the Biden administration has led the country to believe. And yet he's going to have not only the book legally thrown at him, but the media, the treatment. What I was hearing, when this happened, and all throughout yesterday, it was totally different than what we've seen, even with other, whistleblowers and people like, what was her name, who leaked the Treasury information against Trump. She did get caught. What is this guy facing? What's going to happen, to this guy? What realistically, I guess.
I think they're going to charge him under the Espionage Act, and it's going to be a very serious felony. He'll go to prison. And I'm not, frankly, I'm not going to defend his actions. I think he should go to prison, but I also think that we need to, we have to have equal justice in the national security apparatus in this country. And we can't prosecute kids like this because he goes against the globalist war machine and then make heroes out of the Vindmans of the world who oppose Donald Trump, who doesn't want to have America be a war machine around the world. Obviously, that the Vindman who's from Ukraine, he bragged about how he was going to go be the defense minister. They have to put him on a strict diet if he's going to go back in the military, but he's going to go be the defense minister for Ukraine. He's bragging about leaking the president of the United States phone calls, right? He is on the National Security Council. You can't get more damaging to our national security than a president of the United States worrying that he can't say something on a secure phone line because one of his national security advisor aides is a subversive. Well, I have to be careful. I don't want to get sued. Someone on his national security team is subversive, has sympathies for a foreign country. So he uses his position on the National Security Council to undermine the president of the United States because of a policy disagreement on this national security aide's home country. There's no reason that Vindman should not be in jail for that.
And him or somebody else, although it likely was him. Had this been going on before the Ukraine transcript, the president released it just to get it out there. But the contents of the phone call between Trump and the Mexican president, that was released. To have presidents not have confidence in their conversations with other world leaders is an absolute disaster.
Yeah, that undermines our national security more than anything. This 21-year-old
right.
president does not have confidence that he can have confidential conversations with foreign leaders without it being leaked to sympathetic newspapers because of a policy disagreement by some career bureaucrat who is, assigned to the National Security Council. That's outrageous. So no, I think that this 21-year-old kid should be charged, and I think Vindman's, should be charged.
So, this one, I don't want to take too much time talking about this until it lays out. But since the last time you were on talking about the Trump indictment, man, you've been busy and finding these connections with the Biden White House and these, Bragg is obviously that one case, but it looks like the Biden White House has been a lot more hands-on than we have been led to believe. But it's not just Trump. I was reading the Fox News article that you were in the other day. The difference between not charging, and I'll let you explain exactly what happened outside the abortion clinic, but the difference between not charging Noda and seeking a 10-year sentence for an anti-abortion, pro-life activist is one of the more glaring examples, where you have somebody who vandalized a church, sprayed a member of the church in the face with the spray paint. When they tried to stop them, they won't seek any prison time for that defendant. It's just another, it's not even an example of two tiers of justice. It's because when it's arbitrary like that, there are no tiers, right? Yeah. So explain to people why this is such because people say they committed two very different offenses. Right. Exactly. Can you explain what Hoke did versus what Noda did and why this is crazy?
Yeah, this is outrageous what happened. You had this Mark Houck was in Pennsylvania. He's like this 48-year-old father. He was with his 11-year-old son, and they were praying outside of an abortion clinic, right? And some abortion worker there got into a scuffle with his son, and so Houck pushed him, right? And what did the Biden Justice Department do? They charged Houck with a felony and sought 11 years in prison because of a scuffle, because of father protecting his son. Whether Houck should have pushed him or not, was he defending his son? Was he being too aggressive? Who knows? But seeking 11 years in prison for a scuffle outside of an abortion clinic, that is coming directly from the Biden Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Kristen Clark runs the Civil Rights Division. Pam Carlin is her whack job number 2. Vanita Gupta is the Associate Attorney General. Kristen reports to Vanita. Vanita is the Associate Attorney General, the number 3. Matthew Colangelo, who we'll talk about later, it was the number 2 to the number 3. So he was very much involved with this charging decision after Mark Hoke protected.
Same people.
Yep. And so, right. And so thank God the jury acquitted Mark Hoke of this horrific judgment by the Biden political appointees to go after him and try to seek 11 years in prison. Contrast that with Maeve Noda. Maeve Noda is a deranged trans terrorist who went into a Catholic church in Bellevue, Washington, near Seattle, and destroyed this church. He spray painted a statue. He broke glass. He spray painted a church worker in the face. He got into a fight with the police. He scared the hell out of this little old lady in the church praying. Caused tens of thousands of damage to this church. It's on video. What did the Biden Justice Department do? What did the Civil Rights Division do? Because the Civil Rights Division is in charge of what's called the FACE Act in both of these cases. If you're damaging abortion clinics or churches, it's all under the federal FACE Act. The same people in the Biden Justice Department covered this up for 8 months. They didn't charge this deranged trans terrorist for 8 months. They finally charged Noda. I don't know what the proper pronoun is. Finally charged Noda, and I don't want to misgender Noda.
It's ridiculous.
And be a hater, because I'd hate to misgender a terrorist. But so they charged this Noda with a misdemeanor, right? And then they just did a plea agreement where they are recommending 0 jail time, right? So you have this trans terrorist destroying a Catholic church, spray painting the church worker in the face, fighting with the cops, scaring the hell out of a little old lady, destroying statues, tens of thousands of dollars in damage. Because it's a trans terrorist, a Biden supporter, 0 jail time, versus a father protecting his son praying outside of an abortion clinic, 11 years in prison. This is the most egregious example yet. And this is my point. When I say that, when I'm out there defending Trump and people are like, oh, you're just defending Trump about this 2 systems of justice, here's the problem. If they can do this to Donald Trump, a billionaire former president and future president potentially, just imagine what they can do to the rest of us. They're going after fathers protecting their sons outside of abortion clinics. And this is part of lawfare. This is not our parents' or grandparents' Democrat Party. These are not liberals who love America, just disagree with conservatives on the best way to get there. These are leftists. These are Marxists. They hate America. They hate equality. They believe in equity. They hate free speech. They believe in censorship of misinformation and disinformation that ends up being true. And they hate due process. They believe in Me Too and politicized, weaponized justice systems where we put Christians in prison for defending their sons and turn trans terrorists into heroes.
Yeah, these are people who are vigorously defending those that they claim have a right to something that appears nowhere in the Bill of Rights, while they persecute and prosecute people for essentially exercising rights that are right there in the Bill of Rights. Whether it's the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, even Texera, this label they threw on him at CNN. Apparently, he's a gun enthusiast. He's a gun enthusiast. So what? What is that? That's the Second Amendment, is the right to keep and bear arms. In the First Amendment, he has a right. Houck has a right to be against abortion. It's in his faith. That's part of him. He's practicing his faith. And he's, by the way, if he's out there praying outside of an abortion clinic, it's a grievance. And there was the tussle, like you said. I mean, whether or not you're defending your son, I'm a father, so I'm not going to judge him too harshly for that. Whether or not it was appropriate to be physical or not, that's something else. That's a different, story altogether. But how they come after you, Mike, is basically, is what matters to me. Like, what were you doing? When there are violations of the First, Second Amendment, they don't care. They don't care at all. They have these rights they created in their minds. I was talking to Steve Turley about this, Dr. Steve Turley, on Wednesday, that what you're really doing is violating their religion, like tenets of their religion. And if you are, wanting to see the justice system, properly applied to somebody who identifies as being a member of the trans community, that's a violation of a tenet in their religion. You can't do that. And they got to let that person go, be easy on that person, while they got to hammer somebody who has more traditional values or is exercising rights that are in the Bill of Rights. I want to read this to you. The Washington Post cracks me up. Breaking news. A new batch of subpoenas by federal prosecutors, which has not been previously reported, seek to determine if Trump or his advisors scammed donors by using false claims about voter fraud to raise money. Before I even ask you if that's even possible, I just don't understand how you could sue somebody over this concept of voter fraud. So they think it's established or something. I'm not there myself. But aside from all of that, I mean, this is the same special counsel investigation, right? And they're just looking for new ways because they can't beat. They're afraid, as you rightfully pointed out, they can't beat him at the ballot box, so they have to beat him in a jury box, in some tainted jury box somewhere. Can they do this?
Well, they can try, because you have this Garland picked special counsel, this Democrat Jack Smith. His wife is a donor to Biden. I mean, this is clearly a hit job. This is part of lawfare by the Democrats to take out Trump. Like you said, they fear they can't beat him in the polls, so they're simply going to indict him. And they've done They've done it. It's for the first time in American history, they indicted a former president, and it's based upon bogus, trumped-up charges. There are 5 different fronts right now in their lawfare. Number one, you have Democrat New York Attorney General Tish James bringing a fraud civil lawsuit against Trump based upon the theory that Trump somehow duped sophisticated Wall Street banks. They loaned him money. He paid them back in full with interest, but Tish James somehow claims that this is fraud. So Trump is doing that. The deposition, I think he did his deposition yesterday on that. That is just, it just shows you that Tish James is probably the dumbest lawyer in America. The second dumbest lawyer is Alvin Bragg. He's the Manhattan DA, Democrat Manhattan DA, the George Soros funded DA. This is the second prong of the Democrats' lawfare to take out Trump. They're going after Trump for his payment of a settlement. He paid a settlement claim for like $130,000 allegedly to Stormy Daniels back in 2016 to make his alleged affair with Stormy Daniels from 2006 go away. And Alvin Bragg's looking at a federal campaign finance violation here, even though Donald Trump allegedly used his own funds to pay this off and not campaign funds. And so this legal theory is that Trump somehow committed a misdemeanor for record-keeping misdemeanor because he put it in the wrong books in 2016. There's a 2-year statute of limitations for this misdemeanor of putting it in the books in the wrong place. I don't even know how it would be a misdemeanor, but let's just play along. But we're past the 2-year statute of limitations, so he tried to transform this into a felony by tacking on federal election law, apparently, but he didn't put the legal allegation in the indictment. It says it doesn't have to, which is clearly a due process violation under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. But remember, it's just a laughable legal theory laughed at by the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN. But remember, let's look at what case, the Manhattan DA, the prior Manhattan DA, at Alvin Bragg's urging, when Alvin Bragg worked for the New York Attorney General's office, passed over this case. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney passed over this case. The Federal Election Commission passed over this case, and Alvin Bragg himself passed over this case. And then one of Bragg's assistant DAs quit and wrote a book, Mark Pomerantz, and so unethically, I would argue. And so Bragg was taking heat from the left. And so back in December, Bragg hired Matthew Colangelo from the Biden Justice Department, the guy we talked about before that was deciding whether Hauk versus Noda. So this Colangelo was in the number 3's office, a very senior political appointee in the Biden Justice Department, 7 years with the NAACP, Obama Justice Department under Eric Holder and Tom Perez. Tom Perez went to be the labor secretary. This Colangelo was his chief of staff when Perez was the labor secretary. Perez went to be the Democrat National Committee chair for Obama. This Colangelo went to the Obama White House as a political appointee, labor union guy. He went to the New York Attorney General's office. He ran essentially the Get Trump unit for 4 years, the Trump derangement unit for 4 years, where he constantly investigated and sued Trump businesses, Trump administration. Then he was on the parachute team into the Biden Justice Department in the number 3's office. He was the acting number 3. And then when Vanita Gupta, who's this left-wing radical, was going through the confirmation process and got confirmed, Colangelo was Vanita's number 2. So the number 2 to the number 3. Bragg recruited him to go resuscitate this zombie case against Trump, passed over by all those different offices, laughed at by the liberal press. Colangelo helps Bragg resuscitate this case. Joe Biden sent Colangelo to Bragg to take out Trump. There's no question about it.
That's what I was going to ask you.
There's no question that happened. It's not like Colangelo just quit his job at the Justice Department one day. Senior Justice Department job, went online, found a job opening in Bragg's office, knocked on Bragg's door and got hired, right? So that's the second prong. The third prong is this Democrat, Fulton County, Georgia DA, Fani Willis, is looking at the non-crime of a presidential candidate objecting to a presidential election and twisting arms to do it. That is allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. It's also allowed by the First Amendment, right? Politics is not pretty. And even if you say, go find votes, that means there are votes to be found. Trump didn't say, go create votes. He said, go find them. And Democrats do that every day with their voter harvesting. So there's that one. Jack Smith, this Garland handpicked special counsel Democrat with this Democrat donor wife, is also looking at that same First Amendment Electoral Count Act of 1887 legal theory, trying to turn it into a felony. And then Jack Smith is also looking at Trump for the non-crime of a former president having his presidential records in the office of former president, federally funded, congressionally funded office of former president with federally funded staff, with security clearances, with secure office space called SCIFs, and Secret Service protection. That is allowed by the Presidential Records Act, right? And if it were a crime to have, for former presidents to have their presidential records classified or not, every former president would be in prison. And look what former Vice President Joe Biden did. He did not have the right to have these records. He had several stashes of stolen classified records from the Obama White House in several different places. And as we said, as Miranda Devine reported, Hunter Biden almost certainly used these records. And then back to Jack Smith, if it's a crime to object to presidential elections, Democrats would be in jail for objecting to the Republican wins in 1969, 2001, 2005, 2017. This is all Democrat lawfare to take out Trump.
Is this a tell when you read something like this from the Washington Post? Is this a tell that the Presidential Records Act is just not going to do it for them? So they're trying to find, anything, to throw against the wall to see if it sticks? Or would you just anticipate them adding this to a long list of nonsense charges? I mean, if you're going in a direction like this, how could you even prove that the claims he made are false to I don't even understand how you could do that, because I've read some of those fundraising emails. Obviously, I mean, I don't know. That's, if you read the article, it looks like they're really trying to say that this is illegal for him to have done this. Every campaign has made these claims, whether they're true or not, and raised money off it. I don't understand what makes the voter fraud claims so special.
It's complete nonsense.
Really? Is this stupid? Is it really?
Yeah. Remember, Hillary Clinton illegally paid for the Steele dossier from campaign funds. Crossfire Hurricane, Perkins Coie, Mark Elias used campaign funds to cook up the Steele dossier, put it in the wrong books. She was also in New York at the time. Why isn't Bragg prosecuting her? She actually used campaign funds and had a campaign finance violation, and she used this Steele dossier to go after Trump. That should be a felony. That's actually a clear felony, because she clearly lied and used campaign funds to do it and tried to interfere with the election. And she also raised money off of this. So where are her wire fraud? Where are the wire fraud charges against Hillary Clinton for raising money off of her bogus Steele dossier that she illegally used campaign funds to cook up?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, she raised money off of the claim that Trump was a traitor who was colluding with Putin, and later, obviously, they just expanded that and stole the election. But she was saying, this guy could be a Russian asset. They have all this dirt on him. We can't let a guy like that in the White House. And that was not true. But if you were to do this, Mike, then you could really it would be open season on candidates, because candidates lie in fundraising emails all the time. I mean, I just don't understand. Even if I'm not even conceding, because I haven't seen the body of text for everything they're talking about or what they're specifically referring to. But even if you concede that what he was fundraising off of ended up not being true, so what? They all do this. I really don't, I don't see anything special here with that. Let me ask you this last thing. We're coming up on 1:00. What do you make of the House's efforts so far? You have the House panel, basically. I think it's Andy Biggs, bringing up the concept Bragg has to pay back some of that federal money. You think that's the right direction? Or and Laura's telling me one more. I must have missed somebody's question. But you think that's the right direction? Or should the Republican House be doing something more? Something bigger?
I have been a constant critic of Jim Jordan on the big tech fight. I think he's terrible on tech. I was a total pain in Jim Jordan's ass when he first started the weaponization committee, because I thought he got off to a slow and bumpy start. I have quickly become a big fan of Jim Jordan on oversight. I think he's doing fantastic work on oversight as it relates to Bragg. He's showing courage, and it is well within his constitutional duty. It is his constitutional duty to do necessary oversight here, because Bragg is using federal funds to interfere in a presidential election. He's denying Trump due process and equal protection of law. He's not prosecuting real crimes in New York like rape, robberies, carjacking, murders. And so he could do this political hit against Trump. So Bragg is contorting federal election law. I am very pro Jim Jordan on this, and I think he's doing a really good job. He's starting to fire on all cylinders. James Comer's been doing a fantastic job on the oversight committee since day one. We're finally starting we're finally into a good groove here with this oversight. And so I am 100% supportive, and I think they should keep going.
And I see what she's talking about. It's along the lines of what you just said. So I'll follow it up with this. Dog, this is yours. Does Bragg going to federal court now give Jordan, and maybe you'll understand this, I don't, but does Bragg going to federal court now give Jordan a stronger tool to force compliance with these subpoenas, committee subpoenas, as opposed to using contempt of Congress and referrals to DOJ that basically, let's be honest, will end up nowhere?
Yes, Bragg is so stupid for suing Jordan in federal court. It is a frivolous, laughable lawsuit. And what it means is this federal judge up in the Southern District of New York is going to issue a ruling saying that Bragg has to comply with the subpoena. Otherwise, like Dog said, Jim Jordan would have could have gotten a House vote, the whole House would have to vote to enforce a civil subpoena, which you can do, but that's difficult to do, especially when you have a very narrow margin. Or the Biden Justice Department, Jordan would have to do a criminal referral to the Biden Justice Department for contempt of Congress. And of course, Merrick Garland would have ignored that. So it is so incredibly stupid that Bragg filed a lawsuit against Jim Jordan. But what do you expect? This guy's a complete clown.
You know, this, I actually lied. I had one for you before. This is just personal opinion. Do we need a civil rights division at the Justice Department? You know, I've long been a critic of it, but people, you know, tell me I don't know the law. It was necessary then. It's necessary now. Do we need this division? It just seems to me like it's always filled with ideologues. Doesn't matter if, look, Trump's civil rights division wasn't, you know, wasn't any better. It's not staffed with right wingers who are going after left wingers. But that's the way it seems to be. You know, could justice survive without this thing?
Well, I'll tell you that, you know, it's the Democrats, the leftists have taken over every institution in America, the justice system, judges, the corporations, even the military. So we're going to need civil rights, right, when they come after us. But I'll tell you this, when I'm Trump's acting attorney general for 3 weeks during my reign of terror before I'm chased out of town, I will fire so many people in that Justice Department. I will indict so many of our political enemies. Soros, the Bidens, Planned Parenthood, BLM, Antifa. I'm indicting all their asses. I'm firing all these liberals at the Justice Department. I'll reassign them to the southern border. It will be a 3-week reign of terror.
Excellent. I'll tell you, Mike, you're killing it. People, if they haven't been catching on War Room, they should. You got that connection. You drew that line right from the Biden White House to Alvin Bragg's office. So people, if you haven't been following Mike's interviews on War Room, you should. But what else are you up to, Mike? And where can people follow what you're doing?
I'm just being a hellraiser every day. It's like I get paid to be a jerk. It's great. I love it. Actually, I spend my own money.
Beautiful, man.
I'm really dumb because I'm spending my own money to run this thing. But anyway, it's article3project.org, article number 3project.org, at Article 3 Project, at Article number 3 Project on Getter, Twitter, Truth. And my personal, when I'm not kicked off of Twitter, it's at MRDDMIA, MRDDMIA. And thank you very much for having me on.
All the best. You're welcome on anytime. We're never going to have a shortage of content to discuss this. So I'll see you soon. All the best. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Mike Davis, everyone, go check him out on Twitter. It's pinned to his Twitter feed right now. I've been suspended 5 times from 8. I think it may even be 8 at this point on Twitter. So definitely follow the Article 3 Project too. Again, it's at Article numeral 3, number 3 Project on Twitter, Truth, Getter, all of them. He's like, when I'm acting attorney general, I'll tell you what, I had high hopes for Whitaker. I got, and he didn't, you know, he was dealing with a lot of crap there, but Mike Davis, ladies and gentlemen, I got a feeling that, that would be a real bull in the china shop. I'd give my left arm, to see that, because I just don't, you got to operate under the assumption of what he just said. It's not even an assumption. We know it's true. These fanatics, these ideologues, they've taken over everything. So then what the hell is the point of keeping them around? Right, Laura? Right? Definitely pay to watch that happen. Oh, I would love to watch that happen. Mike is great. I know, but the fans, the viewers love him, man. That's so funny. Yeah, it was funny stuff. Because they would have a meltdown after everything. Why did Fox News not find that connection? Why did it this is his world. This is Mike's world. And I understand that, you know, he knows the players involved, his work he did with Grassley, he knows the town. But why didn't an investigative journal, forget about the New York Times, the Washington Post? I mean, we can just assume, I mean, they literally collaborated with the government against Texera. And I'm with Mike. I don't like, you know, if you, let me put it this way, because I know what a whistleblower faces. If you try to go through the proper channels and, you know, you just don't get anybody's response. You know, according to Snowden, he did try. I don't know. You know, I can't speak to whether or not that's true, but, you know, Bradley Manning, everyone loved it when Obama commuted that sentence. Why? Because Bradley Manning is trans, right? It's just for the same reason that Noda gets away. While Hauk is going to have, they'll try to throw the book at the man. And again, we can't just keep getting lucky. That's what happened. Like Mike said, thank God the jury didn't see it that way. But we can't be leaving it up to a jury of our peers on whether, certain charges should ever even be brought. So if there are charges that should never have been brought, or they're being shotgun charged, we shouldn't have to, in this country, rely on a jury of our peers to undo the mistakes that judges aren't supposed to allow to go forward, for instance, right? Or undo the mistakes of a zealot prosecutor. I don't even know. Overzealous isn't even the word. I mean, these people are fanatics. They are straight up fanatics. All right. That was just most excellent. All right. Let me get rid of the NBC News. And I'll just read this to you. Jack Teixeira, 21-year-old member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Let me put this up before we get back to Florida, because I want to get back to Florida before we get to your questions. Was arrested by federal authorities Thursday in connection with their investigation into classified documents that were leaked on the internet. And by the way, what they show is that everything I've been telling you for a year has been true. We have, and he writes articles sometimes for the Washington Examiner, but Elon and I on Locals have been trying to explain to people that war is, you can measure who's winning and who's losing. There are gauges. It's all data, and according to the administration's own documents that were leaked here by Mr. Teixeira, for every one Russian that is being killed, 7 Ukrainians are also being killed. That's actually pretty, if it's accurate, that's pretty close to some of the assessments we've put up in the past. This was never going to be this idea. You have Victoria Nuland going out there talking about we're preparing to be a part of rebuilding Ukraine. I don't know what you're talking about. Air defenses are destroyed, according to these documents. They're being bloodlet. The Russians were depicted as incompetent, immoral, while Ukrainians were super moral, highly competent because they were trained by us. What these documents show is that this is really a NATO war without Ukraine being inducted into NATO. And it's a war that NATO is losing, as we told you. And again, for what, Laura? A year we've been threatened by a certain social media company that revenues we make on our videos will be withheld if we continue to talk about Ukraine in this fashion. Well, who's misinforming now? I just wish that this particular gentleman would have went through the proper channels. Now, again, as a morally speaking, if it was me and I went through the proper channels and nobody was hearing me, then, I'd like to think I would leak it too. I'm going to be honest with you guys. However, you cannot encourage people doing that. Look at what it was like under the Trump administration. You literally can handicap government. Yes, most national security stuff I've come across that they say, is classified and can't come out. Names and sources, names, sources, and methods. Sorry. Or sources and methods. We're putting it all at risk. Most of the time, probably 99% of the time, they're lying and they're covering up a lie. But still, you cannot have these random leaks like this that can cripple the government's ability to be effective. There is a danger to it. I can't see that Mike pointed out Chuck Grassley, his old boss. I can't see Chuck Grassley not taking this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't see it. I'm with Mike on this. Anyone who doesn't, okay, so fine, he doesn't. So you call Matt Gaetz's office. Matt has been yelling about Ukraine since before the start of this thing. You think Matt Gaetz is going to turn you away? I don't think so. Rand Paul is going to turn you away. Grassley is the ranking member, but there are people you could go to. You go through the proper channels. And I know that the proper channel is supposed to be that committee because you're supposed to stay within your purview. But FBI agents took Texter into custody Thursday afternoon, quote, without incident. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced in brief remarks at the Justice Department, which has been conducting a criminal investigation. I'm not even going to read what he has to say, but basically, he's an employee of the United States Air Force National Guard, and it's raised a lot of questions about how could a 21-year-old guardsman get access to this information? Well, there's an alternative for people out there who don't know what the hell they're talking about. And that alternative is to go back before Alec Company days, before 9/11, where we don't share information like that. We don't discern information to different groups and different agencies and different departments to basically be able to share and help try to make sense out of. And we end up with the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing and a bunch of people flying planes into the buildings. Like, that's why we changed after 9/11 who gets access to this kind of information. And I'm almost willing to say, but he shared it with his gamer community is apparently it. That's not the proper channel for this. Basically, though, the media called this kid, and he's not a kid. I just did what he did. They're calling him a kid. He's not. So trying to know he looks like a kid, but he's a 21-year-old man. That's a man. They're calling him a kid who is a dangerous, because he could be dangerous. CNN said, is he dangerous? Like, personally dangerous? He's a gun enthusiast. Shut up. And they also smeared him, saying that he made anti-Semitic comments, etc., etc. Apparently, none of that is true. And in case you haven't noticed his last name, he's not exactly Caucasian. Or at least not, the way. So, Bradley Manning's a hero. Don't forget, Jack Texter is an enemy, a dangerous criminal. Alexander Vindman is a hero. Jax Texera is a criminal. So is Snowden, Julian Assange. Because it seems to me the only real standard here is whether or not somebody produced information to either embarrass them or make them look like liars. Because they are liars. They were lying to everybody. By the way, everyone in the who gave us nasty comments on the shows, everyone who made these replies calling me a Russian agent on Twitter, can I get an I'm sorry? Are you a big enough person to say, ooh, maybe Rich wasn't a Russian puppet. Maybe he was just telling the truth. Isn't anybody big anymore? Real men admit their mistakes.
They can email me their apologies.
Yeah, seriously. And we'll keep them confidential.
No, I want to post them. And that's producer@peoplespunditdaily.com or lbarris@bigdatapoll.com.
Did you know Vladimir Putin funds his polls? All right, let's get back to it. Let's talk more about Florida. We were talking again about we went over the modeling and we're done with that. I'm just going over all of these to show you how this developed. And then we get to the point in September of 2020. Hi, buddy. You came in Daddy's studio office. I knew it was spring break. Sorry about that. He comes in, he's like, hi, Daddy. He's 3, Oh, hey, buddy. I knew it was him too. I heard the little pitter patter of feet outside before the door opened. So we get into it. Don't forget the groups of people we're talking about here. The white Southern Democrat is, when it comes to Florida, that had been over and there were no more of those going back to, let's look at this. Whoops. Let's go back to the chart. 20, and actually in that article I shared with you a second ago, how Florida became so Republican, that stopped, I believe, in 2015 from that. In 2015, the registration change that was helping to fuel the trend in Florida had stopped. And it's in that article. I would like to go back and look at it one more time here, just so I don't give you incorrect information. Okay, so we did see some technically in the beginning of 2017, but technically it was under the Obama administration still. He had not left office, but it had dwindled down to almost no part of the trend whatsoever by 2016. Okay. So by 2015, you had people, you're looking at the Republican primary and saying, I'm a Republican. I want to vote in the Republican primary. I want to say in the Republican primary. And the trend exacerbated significantly. And you can see it right there from the blue columns. All right. And if we were to look at the other version of that, what I'm looking at is a dive of 130,000 almost registrations during the Republican primary, which then, by the way, ticked down even further after Hillary's loss by about 60,000 more. And then by that time, Democrats are almost completely out of their historic advantage. It fell below 200,000 for the first time ever in the summer before the 2020 election. And then it was downhill from there, and Republicans erased it. And I believe by the time voting started, had a slight edge. However, again, that's one group. The other group is, let's just say, Hispanics in general. Under Trump, Hispanics in Florida became more Republican, and it wasn't just Cubans. It was Puerto Ricans in the I-4 corridor. It was working Mexican men and other categories or groups at the origin ethnicity of Hispanic, because they are not monolithic. So that's a second group. And then there was part of that second group, the new arrivals. So Trump dramatically changed how Cubans voted again after Romney squandered the Cuban vote. And actually, it's fair to say that both John McCain and Mitt Romney squandered the historic advantage that Republicans had among Cuban voters. Trump got it back, and then he added to the ranks of South Florida Republican-friendly Hispanics. The largest among those new groups, Venezuelans. All right. And again, this is something we have been talking about for a long time. Then the Northeast and other parts of the country, but California being another great contributor. But largely, there were a lot of Northeastern residents who left and went to Florida, and they were your very typical Republican or Trumplican group, demographic groups, actually. And they make up several subgroups, but working class, under 200,000, fleeing these high cost of living blue states. And yes, during COVID, which Trump was still around, by the way, when many people were fleeing New York, it was still under Trump that was happening. All right. But it is a relatively small share. And then since Trump has been gone, and under DeSantis's first term, the remainder of DeSantis's first time, those 2 years in between, that continued. And they're pouring into where? They're pouring into Pinellas County. They're pouring into Hillsborough, which is turning back more Republican, by the way. They love the Gulf Coast, and they love South Florida. The Space Coast shift from 16 to 20, that's all NASA and all of the directives that he signed. You like your new picture of Saturn, by the way? That would never have happened without those programs. All the blue planets that we're locating, more in the first year that telescope was put out into orbit than we had ever located before with the old dim light trick. And just so people understand, the only way for us to identify planets prior to the Trump telescope, as they called it, that we did the story on it, they were calling it the Trump telescope. Prior to that being launched or placed into orbit, the only way for us to detect whether a planet existed in a solar system or far off solar system is you can see the light of the star. and something passing in front of it will momentarily in orbit, like we orbit the sun. When it passes between us and that star, it dims the light of that star. It's an imperfect way, and it's not a great way to tell, well, is it a gas giant? Is it a terrestrial planet? We don't know. But with the Trump scope, the wobble. Yes, Laura, the wobble. Thank you. Wobble doesn't really make sense on how, it dims the light, but you are technically right. It is wobble. But the way we do it now is very different. And now we can see blue planets everywhere. You're funny. I can see your messages. So anyway, they're not as, well, I don't want to say they're not rare. Life is rare, or so we think. We don't really know that. It's probably not that rare, actually. But we have been able to detect these blue planets now. Economics is politics. Economics is politics. Economics is politics. So when Trump does that, when Trump goes to North Carolina and tries to beef up certain manufacturing companies we've talked about quite a bit, what does that bring you? If, however, you're a stupid white Republican, country club Republican in Georgia, and you somehow think it's great for you and your state to open up Atlanta to Hollywood so they can have a new Tinseltown of the South, it may get your unemployment number lower, but it's going to cost you your state. If you're taco-eating Frank Luntz, who has worked for Pfizer, Purdue Pharma, when they told the country opiates were perfectly safe, and now you work for Nike, and you knock on Doug Ducey's door, and you say, Doug, I'm lobbying for Nike. I'm helping them with their image. They want to build a new plant, or they want new home-based offices, or whatever, in Phoenix. That may be good for your state unemployment number, but it's going to go pretty bad for you when all those professional class, snobby, new college kids roll into town making probably too much money. I don't know what they pay people at Nike, but the fact is, it's not going to benefit you at all. So there's your different groups of people. And then between policy, the policy that Trump put in place, it did two things. One, it promoted demographics that are friendly to Republicans. It incentivized them to move there. Two, it won back the Cuban vote. A bigger margin than ever before. Three, he agitated Venezuela, and he said he agitated them, and he said, "You're welcome over here." He reversed Obama's punishment of these conservative-leaning, Republican voting demographics. You want to jump a fence, or better yet, dig a tunnel going under it and bring in massive amounts of fentanyl every month. That's cool as long as you demographically vote Democratic. But you come over here and dare vote Republican, and you're going to be punished. Then all of a sudden, illegal immigration is a real problem. Hell, even legal immigration. Those of you who are coming and maybe you're claiming political persecution or an unsafe home nation, and you need, you're trying to get refugee status. Oh no, not if you vote Republican. Trump ended all that, and he coddled it, and he brought them back. And again, did you see that picture? They were out there. I remember it like it was yesterday. They were playing violins, people. Was it a fiddle or a violin, Laura? I can't remember, but it was, I think it was a violin. They were playing violins, folks. It was a love fest. And there's Trump doing what Trump does. When he leaves, did he really leave? Nope. He told Pence to set up shop and stay there. And oh, by the way, we're about to send you an entirely new population. All of that combined is what is behind the rightward shift in the state of Florida. And once again, I will say this. Yes, it helped. DeSantis helped by opening Florida before New York. But the truth is he didn't open as quickly as everyone is claiming. That's not true. So to claim that as a reason for why people went there is ridiculous. They were going there early before the state was even really opened. Because to them, even that still looked less draconian. And I know people who did this. They were still stopping cars and doing checks. They were still forcing 8-month-old pregnant women to wear masks. All right? So it has nothing to do with the governor's administration. I'm sorry. It's just true. And just because you win a state, by the way, by 18 points in a gubernatorial election does not mean you're going to duplicate that in a presidential cycle. Bob McDonnell won the state of Virginia in 2009 by basically the same exact margin as the margin we saw in 2022 in Florida. Didn't matter. Mitt Romney still went on to get his ass kicked. And Youngkin barely won it this time. Barely. You want to make a big deal about Miami-Dade and how close Broward and Alachua were? Sure. And I can tell you right now, Bob McDonnell actually carried Fairfax County. Look it up. He carried Fairfax. Forget about Loudoun. He got Loudoun with ease. So gubernatorial elections are the least predictive. They're not at all predictive. That's the truth. They're afterthoughts. Mitt Romney carried Massachusetts. Was he competitive in Massachusetts when he ran for president? No. Everyone, Republican-wise, is going to do better in Florida as time goes on, unless Republicans return to what they were before. Because understand, a ton of these people now in Florida who vote Republican are doing so with the impression that the Republican Party is a Trumpian party. Trumpian politics still very strong there. That's why you have basically the entire MAGA delegation has endorsed Trump already. Gates, Anna Paula Luna, Byron McDonald's. And then who was the last one? Laura, who just came on board last week that called and told us the endorsement was done. We'd find out about it in a couple of days. It's done now. It happened 2 days ago. I'm not ratting anybody out. She's like, shut up. It happened. Somebody in the chat probably knows who I'm talking about. It's in there.
We all know you, though, sometimes.
Well, no, I mean, certain things. That's not true. I'm a
just
fool.
busting your chops.
I just bust out what I think is necessary to bust out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody, I don't know who that is, but do people, and because I don't like the term, and you guys mock who you want to mock. I'm not telling you, not to mock people. I'm just saying and Barnes says the simps too. So does David. I don't want to do that, but because I don't want to catch other people up in that net. I'll tell you right now, though, I've been through, a lot of presidential elections, as a public kind of figure, whatever you want to call it. Almost about a decade. Romney versus Obama. Obama's people were dedicated. They could be mean, but they weren't like, I don't know how to say it. I actually found them to be not that nasty. I found them to be cult-like, but not that nasty. Primaries for the Republicans. Romney's people were nasty people. They were. Romney's people were nasty. I'm talking about when you criticize them, right? But the people that are on team, Laura and I was telling Laura.
DeSantis' people are far more
people we have ever come across. They are the most, just the nastiest, the lowest blowing. I've had.
But
people
it's pitiful, though.
It's pitiful.
It's pitiful. Yeah. It's like so childish that I'm just like, grow up.
Not
get over yourself. You're annoying me.
It's not going to stick. So the attacks are so low. They're just. They're ridiculous, mocking, I like I said, I've always said, I believe my own story is a great redemption story. You mock somebody for a drug addiction and problems they had coming out of the military. I mean, that's what you do. That's low. You know, I mean, it doesn't get much lower than that. I mean, I do everything I can to make amends to society for, you know, me being a bull in a china shop for 6 months of my life. Sorry, you know, that's all you can do. You know, and there's nobody who's safe from that. If someone like me can suffer with dependency issues, things like that, believe me, anybody can. So I just don't see that as it's just low anyway, and it reminds me of the stuff like you'll see out of Geraldo's mouth, who, by the way, supports him. Hunter Biden is a drug addict dirtbag. And I'm like, Geraldo, let me ask you a question. Is he a dirtbag because he takes kickbacks for his dad, or is he a dirtbag because he suffers from drug addiction? Very clearly, he was insinuating that it's his drug addiction that makes him a dirtbag. He doesn't care less about the kickbacks. To me, I don't know. I think the priorities are a little bit messed up there. So getting back to the comment, though, because I did go off the train. Look, Hillary's people were not this nasty. They weren't. Even, Trump's people, when they were nasty to me at first, not Trump and his people. I'm talking about supporters and surrogates who are on social media, right? They are by far, even people I thought I had good relationships with, have gone off the rails and gotten dirty because they picked a horse that doesn't look like they're doing well. But so this person says, due to the Sims not realize Trump won Florida by the widest margin in decades. No kidding. They don't. For a presidential election. DeSantis only won by 19, and I believe it was 18 something. Because Chris got 3.1 million votes versus Biden's 5.3. Dems chose not to compete in Florida very early on. Charlie Crist is an enormously weak candidate. He is now seen. Look, Marco Rubio beat him in the primary in 2010 for a reason. People back then started to view him as a turncoat. Some people in the Democratic side gave him the benefit of the doubt in his first race back for governor against, what's his name? Rick Scott. But he's tried now just to win every office because he has nothing else to do. He's got nowhere else to run. His image is not strong anymore in Florida. Republicans think he's a traitor and a turncoat, and Democrats don't know if they can trust him. He has no home. He's an extremely weak candidate. But it also was for people like, oh, he won it in such a big one. There wasn't a red wave. Republicans won the national popular vote because they did well in areas they hadn't done well in for a while. The problem is they just didn't get enough of these people to come out. Democrats got their vote out everywhere they needed to get it out very efficiently. And the truth is, they didn't play that hard in Florida. Can we get real? Nobody believed that Florida was going to be competitive. I had been saying since the end of 2020, DeSantis' approval rating was way too high. Take that with the demographic changes that are going on in the state of Florida, which I told you Trump was going to come close to winning Miami-Dade in 2020. But the next Republican who runs for office, if they're in the model of Trump, is probably going to win Miami-Dade. DeSantis carried it. And as a governor election, again, in a gubernatorial election, partisan loyalty is not as rigid as it is in a presidential election. So going to that commenter, what they don't also understand is that Trump probably carried Florida by at least 5, maybe 10. But guess what? DeSantis isn't carrying it by 18 points either in a presidential cycle. That's not going to happen. Loyalties will get much more rigid. Those votes that he got in Alachua that made Alachua County closer are not going to happen. Younger voters from the University of Florida and Gainesville are going to vote in higher numbers. They will shrink that margin in a presidential cycle, and it doesn't matter who's on the ballot. I actually think Nikki Haley would lose the state of Florida. Why? Because these new groups of voters that we just went over are non-interventionists. Cubans, Venezuelans, they did not come here to have this country bleed its treasure on foreign entanglements, especially when they have their own issues. Mike Pompeo, he's probably losing Florida. Depends who the Democratic candidate is. But the truth is, you look at some of those, it doesn't matter if they're anti-Trump polls or more pro-Trump polls. They're both very close in the state of Florida. It's usually somewhere around a 7 to 10 point lead for both candidates. Maybe Trump does a point better in this one. Maybe DeSantis does a point better in that one. It's not going to help in a presidential cycle that he won the governor's race by 18 points. There will be people who voted for him as governor who will now vote for the Democrat for president. There will be people, it's like a reverse of the North Carolina phenomenon I was just telling you about. They'll vote Republican for president, but they'll vote for Roy Cooper for governor. Not everyone is as partisan, as rigid as, people are who watch the show, or, I am myself. And I'm not a rigid partisan. I'm not, contrary to popular belief. I'm not at all. The only reason why I was registered as a party in that state is because I wanted to vote in primaries. Laura will tell you that. And also, part of that question is, yes, there will just simply be Democrats who did not show up to vote in 2018 who will vote for president. They will. Agnar, that's a big problem. It's not, they are essentially bribes. So we need leaders who want to put America first, who will not take bribes from the CCP and other corrupt actors that offer them. Well, I also think too, though, the current, and I'm sorry, my eyes are so dry, the current status quo incentivizes that, right? Tell me it didn't incentivize Hunter Biden to use those documents like Miranda Devine reported and like Mike Davis brought up. They're not going to get in trouble for it. Yeah, and on the Ukraine stuff, they discovered this plot. Yeah, Europe wants out of the Ukraine deal. They do. They're trying to get out like crazy, Aaron. At this point, the stuff they told you is not true. So if you're a European country, you're wondering how much more of this you got to take. Aren't you really, don't you want to try to salvage Ukraine so there is this buffer between you and Russia? Doesn't it make sense now for you to want to come to the table? I think it does. Yes, and Senator Budd, I was talking about North Carolina, Ted Budd. And by the way, what did Ted Budd do to win this state by that much? Not a whole lot. His ads were ads touting that he was endorsed by Donald Trump and that under Donald Trump, the country was doing great. Under Joe Biden, inflation is running amok and the world is falling apart. Right, Laura? That's all Ted Budd's ad said. That's it. I don't know if she's going to pop on and say anything, but I guess not. That is all Ted Budd touted when he was on. Have I not done anything yet? I have not. Holy hell. But I did ask for clarification as to what we were doing. So you know what? We'll do this one. And let's take a real quick break. We'll come back more. I'll continue to go through your questions. And I did have one more thing in Florida I wanted to talk about. But it just the article just emphasizes what I'm telling you. And again, this was something that had been going on since the Republican primary. And yes, under Obama, those white Southern Democrats were changing their registration to Republicans, but it was a trickle. It was running out. Trump came along. He exacerbated the finality of that trend, drew more people who are like the demographic of those, except they're not from the South, but, you know, white working class, Hispanic working class, that were very Trumpian in politics. So it just added more added more Republican voters to the voter rolls after the white Southern Democrat transfer was over. Make sense? And then, of course, the policy towards Cuba and Venezuela was huge. Huge. In total, was those 200,000 votes more in South Florida alone. Holy moly. Look at how well he did in Broward County. So, forget about Miami-Dade. Like I said, he was 3 points away from carrying it. And speaking of that question, by the way, the last person to get that high of a presidential margin in Florida was the last person who got within 6 points in Miami-Dade, George W. Bush, during his reelection. And Miami was a lot whiter back then than it was for Donald Trump. Right? National security experts are warning that our aging power grid is more vulnerable than ever. January marked the third time a power station in North Carolina, speaking of the Tar Heel state, was damaged by gunfire recently. Authorities are saying that raises a new level of threat. Authorities are checking our grid for vulnerabilities. They've identified 9 key substations, and if they are attacked, power could be knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months. Imagine it. A blackout lasting not days, but weeks or months. Your life would be frozen in time. If you're honest with yourself, think about it. The moment the power fails, lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. And that's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. It's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. And right now, you can just go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code TPP10 to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities to support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4Patriots and use the code TPP10 to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code TPP10 to get yours today. All right. And again, Rich's tip is if you're going to go to use that coupon code and you use it on the 3-month kit that they have, which is an amazing survival kit, see what you get with that survival kit as far as added extras, free gifts, solar things. I got a stove. I mean, it changes every time. Before you try to add something outside of these bigger, that's basically what I'm trying to say. Use the code on bigger ticket items. And if you do get that 3-month kit, you may want to wait to purchase anything like that to see. You don't know what you're going to get with it. So you don't want to buy it twice for no reason or wait, use a coupon on something you may get. All right. All right. Let me tell you about the deal my friends at Jam and Bean have. Patriots, by the way, who own Jam and Bean. That is a Patriot-owned company right there, folks. They also happen to be absolute artists in the art of roasting coffee. Whether it's a K-Pod, you're like me, you're on the go, or you're also like me, when you have time, you like to sit down and do it right. So you want fresh beans that you grind on your own. They got everything. And of course, their coupon, which the People's Pundit, their popcorn, which the People's Pundit loves to death. Judging from what you guys get, you do take my advice. I'm telling you, you cannot, if you like sweet, you can't go wrong with the new apple pie or their, what is that, Laura? The caramel, right? The caramel popcorn that is just to die for. If you like sultry or savory, like me, the white cheddar is the bomb. Dill, delicious. And my personal favorites, sour cream and chives. Although white cheddar was really up there with sour cream and chives, folks. The new one that we went over, that I basically unbagged on the show and began to eat. Just go to jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 to get this deal I'm about to tell you. When you start a new subscription, using the code TPP40 will take 40% off the cost of the initial subscription, and you will still get the 10% off People's Pundit discount for your subsequent renewals for the subscription every month. It's an incredible deal. I don't know how long they're going to keep it up there. Use the promo code TPP40 to sign up for a new subscription and get 40% off. Again, you will still get the 10% every month when you re-up. It's an incredible deal. jamandbean.com. Send us what your thoughts are about the popcorn, about the coffee, whether you get something, from Four Patriots or any of them. We love to hear about them. All right. I am going to pop this up just as I talk about this, just because I want to show you that this was something that had been going on and culminated right before the 2020 election. And what's important to remember is that there still were people. This is why I keep saying Trump, DeSantis, who else? On the Republican side, I'm a little bit hesitant to go beyond Trump and DeSantis. But let's say it's either Trump and DeSantis. I was saying that Miami-Dade, DeSantis is going to carry Miami-Dade. Rubio is going to carry Miami-Dade. It's a midterm, and that will buffer them quite a bit. But a presidential cycle will still be more competitive. But that regardless, I did believe that by 2024, a Republican presidential candidate like Donald Trump, and I think DeSantis could probably do it too, would still carry Miami-Dade. All right. That by 2020, it was going to be real close. And the Nate Cohens and the others, the Monmouth polls, even Emerson, their numbers from Miami were just way off. We were the only ones who showed that Trump was in the 40s in Miami, as far as I remember anyway. All right, so I want to just point this up, and here I do need a sip of water real quick, people, if you don't mind. This is from September of 2020, about a month or so, a little over a month, 6 weeks ahead of the election. Hold on. Joe says, do you think, because this is, I said I needed a drink of water. Do you mind, Laura? My God. I gave everybody a heads up. She's like, what are you doing? I took a drink of water. It's 2 hours. I did not mute myself. I'm right here. I didn't. You guys can hear me just fine, right? She's lit. Everyone seems to love how Laura busts my chops. I wish you could hear her on the other side all the time, though.
I see you.
You see me. All right, don't do that. I want it big for a reason. I knew you were going to do that. It's like one day I'm going to mess with you. And yeah, see, I don't like doing that though, but I'm going to do something that you don't want me to do on camera. And then I'll teach you.
It's okay. There's only one way you can do that, and that's to remove my picture, and you don't have access to that.
All right, moving on. Joe 56984. Bear with me. Your question's coming up. I'm serious. That's a great question, and we're gonna just stick with me. All right. Republicans narrow Florida voting registration gap to historic low. In Florida, and again, this was September 27th, 2020. In Florida, Republicans have narrowed the Democratic voter registration edge to a historic low ahead of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. At just 183,596, the Democratic advantage is below 200,000 for the first time since partisan tracking began in 1972. Let me say this again. It was the first time ever that the Democratic advantage in the Sunshine State fell below 200,000 for the first time ever in modern American presidential politics. In August, Republicans added a record 58,000 new voters, which is 41% more new registrations for Democrats statewide. At 5,020,000 and change, Republicans now represented, at that time, 35.7 of a total 14 million and change registered voters. That compared to 5,203,795 Democratic voters representing 37%. Now, by the way, Democrats are all the way down to 4,854,000, and Republicans are up to 5,309,000 and change. All right, so remember, I could have showed you that right here. All right, so you can clearly see what's going on here. All right, so Republicans have since beaten this record. They beat it the very next month. And then the month after that, which was an update that really reflected some of the registration changes before those elections. And they undid the advantage going in basically to that election. We just didn't have the data updated yet, although most people who follow this knew it was coming. All right. It depends who's got access to what. In the voter file, I could clearly see it was going to happen. The National Voter File Database also revealed this ongoing trend is no longer the result of older white voters switching their voter registration. While it certainly was a significant driver during the era of Barack Obama, the explanation is too superficial and outdated. That's a significant shift given the statewide turnout advantage the GOP had enjoyed in recent elections in 2016, right? We're going to go through it. And basically, it was R+1. And then, the Democratic registration edge in those two elections was, and it was both elections they were, the advantage in those two elections were 330,000, 260,000, respectfully. Republicans bucked the national trend that favored Democrats by 8.4 points. And yet they still held the governor's mansion and defeated a three-term incumbent. All right. We did rate that, and we were the only ones who, this is the thing about these DeSantis supporters who have been attacking our record. You didn't mind when we were basically the only one who had DeSantis up. We were the only election model on the internet that had that race rated as a Republican. They had him held as they had it rated and predicted Democratic flips. Go look it up on Ballotpedia. Recent polling has been all over the place, and Joe Biden has a lead in the average. We told you that was bunk. It was not going to happen. All right. We had Trump up, and so did Trafalgar. I don't know where Trafalgar ended, but we had Trump very, very, it was like 2.4, 2.5, something like that. So in any event, dovetailing into that question, since Republicans were able to move Florida so much, do I think that Florida will vote to the right of Texas in 2024? Depends on who the nominee is. Again, I do think if somehow Trump is forced out of this race, several states are gone. Iowa's gone. Ohio will go back to being a razor-thin battleground state. Michigan's gone. Pennsylvania's gone. Wisconsin could be close, but probably gone. You'd need somebody who would run the table in the Sun Belt, the South, and take Arizona. And then you would need some way Virginia. And that's what I mean by run the table in the South. I just don't see it. I don't see the map. Because there are other candidates who probably would do better than Trump in Virginia. But I just don't see it. The path to the White House for the Republicans is through the Midwest and the South. I mean, it's very clear. Picking off some pieces in the West and some pieces even in the Northeast. But I'm not sure if we're there yet, because if it's Trump, let's say he wins Florida by like 7 points. And I'm trying to be nice here because the 18-point margins, folks, are not going to hold. That's not going to happen. Even if he wins it by 10, which would be unbelievable. Going back to some of these questions, you guys get it. Florida is never, it has been big margins in midterms. It is never that big in a presidential election. And by the way, if Marco Rubio would have run in a presidential cycle, he would not have won by that margin either. So it would be tighter. But if let's say Trump wins Florida by 10, which I don't think, I really think it would be more like 5 to 10. But if he does, Texas could blow wide open. A Republican could carry Texas under the right conditions by 15 points easy. So I don't know. It's a good question, Joe. Really good question. It could. It's possible. I just don't know, because Trump has done so much better with these Hispanics that other Republicans can't get. Mayra Flores was an embarrassing showing. Texas 15, Trump carried. Even the new borders of 15, he would have carried. Other Republicans, just certain counties, they just can't do it. These really heavily Hispanic, Hidalgo, Star. It's just not working out for them. Zapata. It's not working out for Republicans. However, Trump did very well. And I don't think those candidates were bad candidates. They were just like the year of the Latino woman. They were not bad candidates. Their problem was that Trump wasn't on the ballot. And they simply did not get the benefit of running on his ticket as an America First ticket and then also driving out these voters who never vote unless Trump is on the ticket. So tragic for them that they ran in a midterm or irony, because normally you would think Republicans have a better chance during a midterm. Well, not in this case. All right, but great question. It is possible. I just don't know how likely it is, and we're just going to have to wait and see who that candidate is. I do see, let's say it's DeSantis. I could see Florida voting to the right of Texas because DeSantis isn't getting those Hispanics in South Texas. He's not. Sorry. Great question, though. He may do better with the whites in the Dallas area in Harris County, even in Fort Worth, maybe, because the Republicans did very well in Texas's 12th district, Tarrant County. They did very well in 2022. Why? They did better with white educated voters. That's not the place they had a real problem. By the way, Paxton +9. Paxton +9. I'm just saying that because, why am I saying that? You guys remember John O'Shea just declared Texas 12. He's going to primary Kay Granger. He knows Ken Paxton. Him and Ken Paxton have been friends for a long time. Paxton's pollster had him panicking. I kid you not. And so I got a call and was like, hey, have you polled the state of Texas, which I did in fact do for another client? Did you poll the Attorney General's race? Yep, I sure did. You got this a 2-point race? 3-point race? Our pollster's telling us it's really close. I'm like, no, I don't. Paxton +9. Right, Ken? Right, Ken? He knows. Yeah, Blackfish says, I'm 100% on DeSantis for governor. To be honest, I'm not sure he's even 2028 POTUS material anymore. He took himself out with this stupidity. And look what's going on with his followers, his surrogates, his supporters now when it comes to this Ukraine document leak. They're not even concerned about what's in the papers. They're concerned that Texera wasn't in jail quick enough. That's a problem. Republican voters are largely going to give this kid a pass. This guy. I keep saying kid because the media for 48 hours. Kid. They're going to give him a pass. Oh, I wanted to show you a tweet by Raheem Kassem because he really spelled it out. He spelled it out really well, actually. Let me get rid of this. And then I'm not going to put the whole thing on the screen, but stop. Oops, not invite. I hit the wrong thing. Come on, Laura. Grab the screen. Raheem is textbook. Alex Vindman leaked national security info to destabilize a commander-in-chief and help provoke a war in Ukraine. He goes on chat shows now. Jax Texera leaked information showing how government is lying to you and the world in furtherance of those wars. He's in a cell now. I think Raheem is speaking for the overwhelming majority of Republican voters. Overwhelming. Look at Vindman. Mike Davis, funny as hell, isn't he? He's like, I think he's going to have to do a little work. He's going to have to start running in the morning if he's going to go back in a uniform. In other words, Mike is saying, he's fat. Sure is. The guy's been doing him real well for himself. Hector says, makes me wonder how seeing Latinos for Trump. And actually, before I move on, I'll get right back to you. I just want to get out who that was Blackfish's on DeSantis' future. Yeah, Hector, I'll come back to you in a second. I just want to, pointing to what Raheem is saying here. he really could do himself really a lot of harm here. There's also, and I was going to do a locals video about it, going through the filings to show you who is behind DeSantis and this pact that's been launched for him. This is like a laundry list of donors Republicans have come to hate. Ken Griffin, Bigelow, the Ricketts family. It's not good. And you think that's, wait until Trump gets on a stage with that. The Bush family. Don't give me that crap. Jeb Bush said he didn't clarify it. He didn't endorse him. He endorsed him. 2/3 of Republicans in their own state of Texas say they would never vote for a Bush again. Think about that. I don't know. I'm thinking that she might be onto something. Back to Hector. Seeing as the Southern Democrat is almost dried up going forward, would it be a losing strategy to try to gain the Sun Belt instead of focusing on the Midwest plus the PA? I think you got to do both, Hector. I really do. And I know you got another question, but I really do think you got to get both because, and I mean, I guess you mean to gain the Sun Belt. Democrats are going to have a problem keeping Georgia in the mid to longer term because the white professional class that had turned Georgia blue, all right, is not growing. After the state-to-state migration runs out, that's what's fueling that. It's not a situation like Virginia, for instance, where it's that plus new different waves of immigrants from different areas. Once pro-Republican areas, now not. It's going to dry up as well, like bringing in the white professional class. They don't have a growing population. Black voters, curious to see, like I talked about on Wednesday, whether overturning Roe v. Wade starts to result in an increase in black population because with the help of Margaret Sanger and eugenics, they've been able to hold, liberals have been able to hold the black population at about 12%, 13% for years now as a share of the electorate, no more than 13. All right. So that would be interesting as well. If Georgia gets much more difficult to have abortions in, will that result in then increase in that? But what will happen is there's, I think it's 4.5% right now or 5% Hispanic, which voted for Herschel Walker, and votes for Trump in even bigger margins. That's growing. 10 years ago, that was 1%. I mean, it was nothing. In the last census, it was like 1%. That's all. So, just like so many other states we talked about, when they say the Florida model, when Team DeSantis says, we can apply the Florida model everywhere. That's ridiculous. Florida is its own case. Georgia is its own case. North Carolina is its own case. You can't apply the Florida model unless you're going to kick out all those people who moved in from the New England area and relocate them to Georgia or something. What's your plan? Eventually, these places will be left with liberals and they will increasingly bluer states. That's what happened in California. I've shown this graph a million times as well. California has population increases solely due to international or foreign migration, illegal and legal. The domestic population in California has been suffering from net out migration state to state for years, for 14 years now. So there's not going to be that much more you can squeeze out of the Central Valley and send to, or San Diego or Orange County or whatever. I mean, there's going to be, they're there, but it's already, a lot of that's already happened. And where they have gone is dictating the map now. Like Arizona would probably be gone already. If it gone from Republicans, if it wasn't for all these people moving to Maricopa County. And they're not moving out of California because they're liberals and they're bringing their politics to Arizona. That's not, our results are definitive. They're going to Arizona to get the hell away from blue politics. They're voting with their feet. So that's it. I mean, I think you got to do both, Hector. I really do. And another one from Hector is, looking at the success of Latinos for Trump in Florida, would it have been a good idea to make similar PACs in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Minnesota? Yeah, though you have to tweak those PACs a certain way. They can all be driven for that. But yeah, I mean, they certainly got special attention. I think a part of that is that was the president's adopted new home state. He loves Florida. So he has before, he loved Florida before there was a Ron DeSantis. He'll love it after. So I think they got special attention. And Trump wanted to be seen the way he wanted minorities to see him. He hated and hates how the media would say he's a racist. He hated it. He wanted Hispanics to like him. He wants Black America to like him. He feels like his economic record is a testament to how much he cares about those communities. So I think it was a bit of a special case for Trump to go after Hispanics in Florida the way he did. All right. And Texas Republicans have been better than most, but not as good as Florida, not even close. So, I mean, if you're talking about applying the Florida model, then that has to include outreach and policies that work for these people. Again, with Trump changing those policies, he told the Cuban community, I know you voted for me. You gave me a chance. I'm here for you now. I'm here for your families now. And I'm going to be. And here, let me show you. I'm action, not just words. And I can't say that Republicans in Texas did the same. I can't say that at all. What issues did the GOP stress in Chicagoland area since Brandon Johnson has been elected mayor? The same thing. Let me just put it this way. The same thing that draws people to communism, or at least the same motivations, can also draw them to a populist message. It's easier when they're doing it under the guise of the Democratic Party. I do think, actually, every time an area like Chicago, where Trump squeezed a ton of votes out of, more than he did in 2016. A lot of people don't realize this. Chicago is one of many urban areas where Trump got ridiculous numbers of votes. Chicago is one where he also increases margin and the total votes cast. So I think when you go that far left, you orphan a bunch of people that maybe are not for communism. Look at New York. I mean, they went too far and they clearly orphaned some voters. And that's why Republicans were able to do so well in many different areas, from urban to rural. It's a good question. It's a really good question. Maybe I'm wrong, but I get the sense a lot of people would like to see a Trump-Kennedy ticket. Does Rich think this might still be possible? You know what? With Trump, I think anything's possible. I really do. And it depends on what Kennedy says and does and some of the issues he takes. The economic stuff, Kennedy's going to have to clarify. He's got an image that he's like some real radical environmental. Well, there's a difference between climate change alarmism and environmentalism. And I know, working on a story, speaking of New York, about a place in New York where RFK got involved because, it's funny. Democrats care about the environment, or like these environmental issues when they impact white rich areas. They don't give a damn when they impact lower income areas. And Robert Kennedy was the only one doing anything about it. I do. The short answer is, yeah, I think I do see that as a possibility. But Kennedy would have to move on some things. That would be a hell of a ticket. I got to tell you, that would be a hell of a ticket. The strongest ticket is still Trump DeSantis, in my opinion. It is. But I don't know how far he's going to take this. I mean DeSantis. How far is he going to let these donors and consultants and his wife and others take this? because his wife probably is different, but the donors, well, they care more than the consultants do. The consultants don't give a damn at all. They want to make money. These are people who have been excommunicated from Trump world. So they are pushing this man to run because they need to be relevant again. They've been excommunicated. They'll never get a job in Trump world again, or his candidates. That's why they're doing this.
I have a question, though. You really think he appeals to the Midwest at all?
DeSantis? No.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think he's the strongest pick.
He's just going to shore up some of those Republicans that are, look, the reason why I say that, Laura, is because the Trump or bust vote is like, it's a much, much bigger coalition than the anti-Trump claim to still be Republican vote. All right. It's the same dynamic as Pence. Pence still helped Trump in the sense that he calmed some traditionalists, some traditional like Ben Shapiro Republicans and their fears. I think DeSantis would do that for some as well, which would help him in states like Georgia, maybe. It would help him in maybe Wisconsin, even though Ron DeSantis can't win it on his own. He could try to pull in that 5 to 8% that is definitely going to give Trump a problem if he's the nominee.
I disagree. I think he hurts him more, especially where his money's coming from. So it would leave people more skeptical. It'd be like a Silver Skunk Pence 2.0. Like, can you really trust him?
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from. I do. I just don't think that people are going to abandon their trust of Trump because DeSantis is on the ticket. I don't. I think that they would probably see it more as, because Trump's not going to take their money. Those people, he's not taking their money. They're going to come to Trump, and if he wins the nomination, which is the most likely outcome, they're going to come to Trump and they're going to say, okay, you know what? You're the Republican nominee. I did support DeSantis. Now it's time to let bygones be bygones. And Trump is going to do what he did last time, because I remember he told
100%. I'm not saying he's going to take the money, but I'm saying that DeSantis would be considered a bad influence, not a bad influence. Like, Trump is his own man, and 100% the president is stubborn. Not stubborn, but when he has his mindset, it's set. But I just don't think that they're going to like a DeSantis on the shoulder whispering in his ear.
Which gets us to Ashwin's question. Which VP candidates do you think will help Trump in the general? And I see Laura's point of view.
Concerns.
Yeah, and her concerns. I get that. I just, I think people in the end are going to vote for Trump because he's the only one they're going to vote for. If he picks somebody they don't like as a VP, I don't think it's going to cost them a vote. I really don't. I don't see him picking a Haley. But I'll tell you right now, you better not pick Kristi Noem. I know he likes her.
No Haley. Please,
he likes Kristi Noem. I know he does, because Kristi Noem didn't believe. First of all, if you're looking for somebody who fought lockdowns, Kristi Noem is way more anti-Fauci and anti-COVID than Ron DeSantis. Her state was open way before Florida was open. Some of her state didn't even close. And he likes her because of that. He does. However, there are just, I'll point to Ukraine again. I mean, she's made comments there. She seems to not grasp a big defining element of our epoch, which is she refuses to use government to either not even go after political opponents like Democrats do, but to defend her own. So she passed on the chemical castration ban. There's a lot of stuff that she said she wouldn't do that's like closer to Asa Hutchinson. There was one thing with COVID, I'm trying to remember, but it basically banned passport. I think it was banning passports, vaccine passports. And she said, there's no more role for that than there is in an actual passport mandate. So it would have banned some of the mandates related to the pandemic, and she refused to do it. To me, that tells me you don't know what world we're living in. So if you don't feel that you have to use the government, the power the people have given you now to protect them, like more explicitly than we have had in the past, then you don't know where we're living anymore. You don't know what time this is. They don't give a damn about the Bill of Rights. They don't care. They don't care. Look at the DA in Texas. A 30-plus year veteran in the military defending himself from a violent mob. Nobody would take the case, but this ass says, I have a jury pool filled with Democratic voters. I could probably can convict him regardless of the stand your ground laws that we have in our state. And he did it. So like, they don't understand. People like Noam and others have made comments that tell me they don't understand. And by the way, Greg Abbott wouldn't have done a damn thing if we and others didn't force him. And I did make a stink in front of the camera and behind the camera and on the phone with people I know who give him money. This crap. Oh, well, you can't just pardon somebody. It's Texas. I know. I lived in Florida for years. It's a very similar clemency, executive clemency program. You know how it really works in the real world? The governor picks up the phone and starts yelling at the board. Get it going for this guy. I'm ready to sign it. If you don't, I'm going to make your life miserable. And they go, oh, I'm sorry, Governor. Okay, I'll get right on that. We'll have the case built by Monday. So they don't acknowledge the Second Amendment, and your response is to talk about Constitution with me? Like, are you nuts? All right. So what other VPs, Ashwin? As of right now, I'm not even prepared to put any other names forward. I'm serious. We'll just have to see how it goes. Do we know how much demographics have changed in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin since 2020? AKA, how many Trump voters moved to Florida or Texas from those states after COVID and 2020 and fortification? We do, indeed, which in time we'll go over them in more detail. But, I could pull up the voter file now, but Wisconsin, it has never been more right for Republicans. And they can't get those voters out. It's not the changes. It's motivating some of these people to go vote. Dan Kelly's loss looks a lot like his first loss. It did worse than Hagedorn, and yet Trump still carried it once, almost carried it a second time. And Johnson's map looks exactly like Trump's map. So it's not a matter of demographics. It's really not. And I will tell you, Illinois is the biggest Midwest state for outward migration to Florida, Nevada, and Arizona in that order, I think. Or no, Florida, or Texas, Arizona, Nevada. That's the order. There have been some in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Not so much for Wisconsin. Why was the Vindman brothers monitored by a photographer since they were children who got off the boat? Featured in Ken Burns' documentary, Why Vindman Special. You know what? If you send me that, Aaron, I'll check it out. I don't know that much about it, so I don't want to comment on something I've not seen. Who is a candidate I consider very favorable with Hispanics besides Trump? In your own state, for instance, Maverick, Lombardo did well with them because of his position, right? As Sheriff Clark. Laxalt was polling just as well, and sometimes even better, yet it didn't end up that way, right? Because a lot of them didn't show. They said they were going to, they didn't. So that's a specific example. But presidential material, I don't know. None. Go through the polling. You'll see. No other Republican has really any meaningful Hispanic support, including Ron DeSantis, who's a Florida governor and has a big population of Hispanics he did very well with. It's just not there. It's not there yet. They don't trust other Republicans. They don't. I can point to some instances of where some did very well. Larry Elder did very well during the recall among Hispanic men. Chris Christie did exceptionally well in his gubernatorial reelection among Hispanics, period. but it's not translating. It's just not. What do you think about the CNN and ABC polls that show most Americans believe Trump should be indicted, that he intentionally did something wrong? Look at the way they word it. That's how. And also, matter of methodology issues. That ABC poll is the Wisconsin Biden plus 17 poll, by the way. And CNN and SSRS, or SSRI, whatever it's called. Neither particularly very good. I just think it's all in the wording. It's the way they word it. Fox 2 said almost all Americans. But it's not reality. The truth is, it's not really outlining at all what people... I also just think they're wrong. I mean, I can tell you from our own, others like Rasmussen and Trafalgar, we certainly word the question a little bit differently. But I got to be honest, I think about this a lot. Even if I word the question the way they do, I still don't think I'm going to get those numbers. I really don't. I think it's crazy. Largely, the way they poll still skews rather metro, rather educated. And when that happens, you're going to get Republicans that are just not representative of other Republicans. But I haven't looked at how they weighted or anything like that, which could definitely change it as well. But generally speaking, I think it's the questions, the way they do that. Because even if I weighted it the way they weighted it, I'm not sure that I would get that response. I'm not. Yeah, Jay, I'll see you. Have a wonderful weekend. You as well. I guess we're all going to boogie anyway. But let me say this some goodbye stuff here, okay? Don't forget to share the public polling project far and wide. Contribute if you can. Love to get another one out there and published. I need to, by the way, to be able to whatever. I don't want to say it on air again. On Wednesday probably pissed them off. But the ideological origins of the American Revolution. This is the old original version. That's the new version. All right. That's Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Locals. But also, if you're a YouTube member, I will be putting the link to the Zoom. It's protected in the community comment section. So if you get a notification that the People's Pundit has put a comment out on YouTube, that's that information. So don't miss it. You don't need the book technically to be there and join us. We read it. You're going to, you can listen along. You can participate as much or as less as you want. All right. But you should be able to get the book if you haven't already fairly quickly. I wouldn't say it's cheap, but it's not super expensive either. But you don't need it right away. So if you're thinking about joining, go ahead and do it. If not, check the replay of it. All right. Which the replay is for right now. There's only a replay for local supporters. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to do the YouTube one yet, because it's not even that I can't just get the video recording and put it up there. There are things we say on Zoom that probably are not going to be allowed on there. All right. So I'm not going to censor the book club. Those are people's thoughts. That's their opinions. That's their take, their reason, their rationale. And I'm just not going to censor it because YouTube threatens me with, strikes and bans over things that are perfectly true, by the way. Ukraine is losing the war. Oh, no. A year ago, I could have got you a check. Now it's leaked and known, no matter what John Kirby said, But you too, Nathan. God bless you right back. All right. Yeah, I guess I got pretty much it. I don't think I missing anything, right, Laura? I don't think so.
Not to my knowledge yet.
All right. Don't forget the Florida voter registration tracker that you want here. I'll dump it in the links here now before we go. Actually, as we outro music out, I'll do it. But, locals, you got it up there. I don't know if you've seen it, but you got it. Rumble, I'm sending it to you too. All right. And the last one should be Getter, right? Getter. Sometimes they block my links. That one went through. Awesome. All right. So with that in mind, we're out. We're over. It's 2:22 already. So we're over the time. But see you on the book club on Sunday. If not, we will see you on Monday. I'm not sure if it's going to be a What Are the Odds or an Inside the Numbers. But I think I will give you a heads up if that gets screwed up. But for now, see you next week. Thanks for watching. Be safe.
Deuces.
And deuces. There's it. All right. See you later, guys. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.